David becomes king. From shepherd boy to king of Israel. This is the story of David, a story of patience, faith, and God's timing. But before he wore the crown, David held a shepherd's staff. Let's walk through his journey, how God anointed him, prepared him, and finally placed him on the throne. David was the youngest son of Jesse from Bethlehem. His older brothers were strong and impressive, serving in the army. But David? He spent most of his time in the fields, caring for his father's sheep. Being a shepherd wasn't glamorous. It meant long nights under the stars, protecting sheep from lions and bears. But this is where David learned courage, responsibility, and faith in God. He would play his harp and sing songs of worship, many of which later became the Psalms we read today. One day the prophet Samuel was sent by God to Bethlehem. God had rejected Saul as king and was ready to choose another. Samuel went to Jesse's house to anoint the next king. One by one, Jesse's older sons stood before Samuel. They looked tall, strong, kingly. Surely one of them must be the chosen one. But God told Samuel, "Man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart." Finally, when none of the older brothers were chosen, Samuel asked, "Are these all your sons?" Jesse admitted the youngest was still out with the sheep. They called David in, probably smelling like sheep, simple clothes, nothing impressive. But the moment Samuel saw him, God whispered, "This is the one." Samuel poured oil over David's head, anointing him as the future king of Israel. The Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him from that day forward. But here's the twist. David didn't become king right away. Saul was still on the throne. David went back to shepherding and later served Saul by playing music to calm him. Soon he faced Goliath, the giant Philistine warrior. With just a sling and a stone, David defeated him, proving his faith and courage. People began to sing, "Saul has slain his thousands and David his tens of thousands." Saul grew jealous and tried to kill David. For years, David ran for his life, hiding in caves and living as a fugitive. Twice he had the chance to kill Saul, but he refused, saying, "I will not lay my hand on the Lord's anointed." This time of waiting was God's training ground for David, teaching him patience, humility, and reliance on God's timing. Finally, after Saul's death in battle, the people of Judah crowned David king in Hebron. But it wasn't until 7 years later, after long conflict, that all the tribes of Israel united and anointed David as king over the entire nation. David was 30 years old when he finally became king. He ruled for 40 years, first in Hebron, then in Jerusalem, which became known as the City of David. Under his leadership, Israel grew strong and united. David wasn't perfect. He made serious mistakes, but he always returned to God with a repentant heart. That's why he is remembered as a man after God's own heart. His story reminds us, God doesn't choose based on outward appearance, but on the heart. And his promises never fail. Though we may wait, God's timing is always perfect. So, what do we learn from David's journey? God can use anyone, no matter how small or overlooked. What matters most is a heart that seeks him. From shepherd boy to king, David's story proves that when we trust God and wait on his timing, he will fulfill his promises. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more Bible stories that inspire faith and hope.